Hey, good morning, everyone. This is Sean Cease and with Hillman Sori at the Humantic AI Authentic Selling Leaders Podcast. I want to welcome Hillman Sori to the show this week, where I'm actually super excited to have him. Hillman's a 8X author. Everybody knows him. Author of Triangle Selling, Sales Development, Sales Playbooks. That's just to name a few. He's the co-founder of Coach CRM. I think really driving into how sales leaders can coach their reps and actually keep track of those transactions and so on with Coach CRM. Also a coach, consultant, advisor, and strategist for $0 to $100 million orgs. Want to welcome Hillman. We're here to talk about coaching, a framework for enterprise sales leaders. Welcome, Hillman.
Hey, Sean, thanks for having me on the show. Good to see you.
Yeah,
I'm
my
still working
pleasure.
on my beard, by the way. I'm still working on it. It's
Yeah,
40 years in the
well,
making.
I went your style for a couple of months back there. I went and cut off all my hair and shaved my beard, and now the beard is slowly coming back, but maybe goatee. But
At
we'll
least
see
you've
how we
got
do.
options.
Yeah, I've got options. So let's jump right in here. Coaching, a framework for enterprise sales leaders. So I know I haven't read all of the books, but I've read the sales development books, the playbooks books, and I've read Triangle Selling. And in Triangle
Mm,
Selling, pretty easy to visualize. You've got a triangle, you've got three corners of the triangle, and you frame up, opening, discovery, closing in this framework of reasons, resources, and resistance. Now, have you guys come up with a similar framework for coaching that follows that kind of simplicity or easy to pick up and easy to execute?
well, I'm glad you find it simple and easy to execute. That's first off, thank you for that. It was convoluted and complex to come up with, but I'm glad that in its final form it was simple and easy to execute. Right, much like a pyramid, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, the book you're missing, which I got to get out to you, is called The 5 Secrets of a Sales Coach, which is actually probably behind Triangle Selling, or no, Triangle Selling, the Sales Enablement Playbook, and The 5 Secrets of a Sales Coach are probably our most popular books. But The 5 Secrets of a Sales Coach is, in fact, believe it or not, Hillman and Corey came up with another acronym. Which
Yeah.
we use these because they're easy to remember. It's also just easy to take a giant corpus of content and put it into something that you can articulate and actually hold folks accountable to in an organization. But yeah, and guess what the acronym is? It's got 5 letters. It starts with co and ends in uch.
I was gonna say it's gotta be coach. It's
It's
gotta be
coach.
coach.
Yeah, it's coach. It stands for challenge, outline, action, consequence, and hold accountable.
And hold accountable.
Yeah.
So we don't want to go too far down the Coach CRM road, but I'm going to assume that that is coded right into Coach CRM to make it even easier if you needed a way to manage those transactions, hold people accountable, have action plans, all these goodies is
Yeah.
probably built right in there.
The easiest way to explain it is really Coach CRM is not dogmatic about our approach necessarily, or a closed
Okay.
loop approach to management, but
Mhm.
all of these elements, regardless of what kind of a coaching methodology you might be using. And when I say coaching methodology, I would assume that 99% of people are scratching their heads in the sales profession going, yeah, I don't have a coaching methodology, which is why we came out with this, right? Some folks have grown to do some things, though, just out of habit and best practices, right, that may not be codified into a specific acronym. But yes, so Coach CRM does embody the way in which you go about leveraging technology to create those connections between a manager, either leadership and management, or management and an IC, to be able to impact performance across the table.
Yeah, I love it. So there's a few different tenets of coaching, and we'll see if we can kind of weave around weave these around the coach framework there. Uh, One thing I want to share real quick, Aru, who's moderating for us in the background. Aru, could you share that slide, that image? Uh, I wanted to share this too. So, when you may not have seen this, a couple of weeks ago, I posted this just to say, hey, of all you guys that are, getting coach, or where do you learn, or so on. And my question was pretty binary. Did you learn the most at the orgs that you worked for, or on your own? And I was actually surprised. Usually I'm not surprised, because lots of times the polls that I put up, they're pretty contrived. You know what the answers are going to be, you know. But I was actually shocked by this, that 1 in 5 people are getting coached by their organization, and it would seem are getting the training that they want. Otherwise, 4 out of 5 people are going out and doing their own coaching and training and so on are on their own. Are
Mm.
you surprised by this? Are you shocked sometimes that this is actually what's really happening, contrary to the amount of coaching you would think is available on LinkedIn, or the fact that everybody's a coach? I basically that everybody's a coach, and you could
Yeah,
take
yeah.
that down a road.
Well, everybody's a coach, everybody's a guru, and everybody's got some advice on LinkedIn. But there are ways you could add to this question by saying, the levels of efficacy, and of course, you've got a recency phenomenon where it's like, hey, I just saw Sean's post yesterday, and I tried that, and I got a conversion, and so actually, I've learned more online than I've learned on my own, right? Than I've
Yeah,
actually learned in my organization. But universally true. We've been running a sales management consulting and training firm, an award-winning training firm for the last 7 years, 8 years. And the reason it exists is because there's a huge gap in the ability for organizations to effectively train up their teams. And in part and parcel to that, the reason we've kind of dovetailed into coaching and actually spun off and started a software company is because there's a woeful lack of rigor with respect to coaching. And I think a lot of it has to do with the fact that some folks don't know what it is. Very few folks have actually been trained on a methodology for coaching to do it effectively. And often, unless you've had a great coach, it's difficult to become a great coach because you're learning through the transom, right? Like I got interested in coaching, and I probably wouldn't have even called it that. Like I would have called it some amalgam of other things inside of management, because I actually had great coaches. I had a great swim coach. I had a great basketball coach. I've had great business coaches. I still use coaches for just about everything I do. I have a personal trainer that I consider a coach now. I've had a speaking coach in the past. It's just something that's part of my makeup of how I grow both professionally and personally, but not everyone's had that opportunity.
yeah. When you were listing off the different opportunities that you've had to be coached properly, the thing that popped into my head was it seems like a long time ago that you may have left your ego at the door, and naturally you're just humble and have a lot of humility and things like this. And again, that popped it's not part of the agenda, but it popped into my head, and I think it's one of those soft skills that's super super important, isn't it? That when it comes to coaching or being coached, and actually reaching out and saying, "Hey, I want some help," or on the other side, if you are actually a coach, to know your limits. And I think whether it's the coach or the coachee, there's probably an equal leave your ego at the door there. And that kind of leads me to the trust building. I wanted to ask you what your thoughts are on trust building as kind of a foundational part of coaching between the coach and the coachee. And I would love to hear your thoughts on that simple phrase of leave your ego at the door, whether it's for sales, coaching, training, whatever. How powerful is that skill to just leave it at the door?
I think that's important. I'd like to back up to something you just said, though, which I think is really, really key, that coaching begins with hiring. Not everyone is coachable. And that's not saying that not everyone can have success, but not everyone is coachable in a certain discipline, right? And we'll keep it to sales since that's what we're talking about here. So where
Yeah.
do you begin your coaching rigor and your coaching construct? It starts with the hire. I was actually just before this conversation having a conversation with a startup founder who's talking about some of the hires that they're potentially bringing on. And I said, look, you got to have a competency matrix out of the gate. And part of that competency for your specific organization needs to be identifying in an interview whether or not you're working with somebody, talking to somebody who is coachable, because you're going to have to coach them into some things and train them on some things in your organization that are going to be material to their growth. And you want to make sure you get good clay, right? You can't do anything
Yeah.
with hard brittle clay that's not malleable, right? So just going back to that, that's one of the first places you start. But you asked a question that I think is a poignant one around trust. And the question, so it was a two-part question. You said about trust, which I understand, and then this piece around leaving your ego at the door is with respect to creating trust. Is that the question?
Yeah, yeah, in how important it is, or is it important that that we have to kind of let our hair down and let our ego go a little bit so that we can uh, build trust or create the conditions where we could become trustworthy and so on. But yeah,
I think that trust is part and parcel to authenticity. And I'm not talking about like the authenticity everybody demands of people on social where it's like, I've got to tell you, I
yeah,
won't go off on that path, but you know what I mean?
yeah,
There's authenticity and then there's the risk of overshare. What I mean by authenticity is you have to show up as who you are. You can't just pretend to
yeah,
jump into your coaching skin. Now I'm going to be the coach and I'm going to, tell Sean, where he's got some gaps and what he's got to do. But, 90% of the other time that he interacts with me, I'm a different kind of a person. You know what I
yeah,
mean? You have to be authentic. And part of that authenticity is the work of a coach is understanding yourself. You have to understand both your tolerance for things, to your point, your level of skill, your level of aptitude. You also have to understand your MO and how you go about coaching, and that coaching piece, which is the conversation, the interaction, the level of discipline that you have with respect to frequency of interaction and follow-up and things like this. And you got to be true to that, because you know what, here's what happens a lot. Sometimes you'll get an organization where someone says, yeah, Sean, you got to start coaching your team. And so you come out of this meeting with Hillman, you go back to your team, you're like, I'm going to start coaching you guys up. Let's put 15 minutes on the calendar every week for the next few weeks. I got 6 reports. I got my 15 minutes. And then you do this for a week. And then the following week, you get pulled into a meeting. So you kick the can on the meeting with Cammie, and you kind of move the meeting around with John. And then you never really did get back to Cammie, but you did keep the one with Tony. Anyway, that's a lack of authenticity and consistency. And it speaks volumes. It's what you're demonstrating as a coach that creates the receptivity and the trust-based relationship, more so than any of the more contrived or more kind of rigorous things where people say you've got to establish a relationship with people. Well, the trust part of the relationship is about what you do and what you say and how committed you are to their success. And if part of you is not necessarily investing in knowing the family and knowing the dog and then asking about the vacation, but you're authentically this person who just doesn't do that on a regular basis anyway. However, I am all in on your career and all in on what's happening in your pipeline and all in on, some of the things that are important for you here in the job. That's still okay. You know what I mean? So I don't
yeah,
think that, and I think that part of the challenge is that folks view this coaching thing as this new jacket you've got to put on, which feels a little uncomfortable because you're not quite sure how to show up. Start just showing up as yourself and showing up as consistently as you possibly can in that space. And then you create some really solid expectations and some solid relationships.
yeah. So in showing up, what's in the showing up piece, just real quick, so we have a nice little detailed snip here. As far as showing up, let's talk about just real quick the cadence of that. Just black and white. Should coaching happen once a week, twice a week, or every other week? That's what I meant to say. Bi-weekly, so once a week, but twice a week. Something's going on.
That's a whole different kind of
Yeah,
relationship.
yeah,
That's called
that's all
therapy.
different.
But yeah,
Yeah, yeah, something's going on. Once a week,
that's an
bi-weekly.
intervention.
Yeah, exactly. What's the proper cadence? Or
Oh,
does it
Sean,
depend?
you're
Does it
talking
depend?
You're talking to a guy who's been a consultant for 25 years. I'm going to say it depends. Come on, man.
Yeah,
Like, you
I know.
got to pay me to come in and do some diligence and analyze your organization and come back with a report on how often you should be. I'm just kidding.
Yeah,
So here's what I'll say. Here's what it depends on. Of course, it depends. And here's what it
yeah,
depends upon. It depends upon the level of skill and tenure of the person and level of maturity of the person that you're coaching, right? If this is someone who has been in the business for a significant amount of time and the gap that you see between where they are today and where they want to go, or where the organization needs them to go, is a little smaller, or maybe not as critical to the organization or to their professional career, then that could be a more spaced repetition type thing, right? If you're dealing with someone who is newer to the organization, who requires a greater volume of feedback to help them get to where they got to go, and maybe there is a higher frequency of activity, whether that's an SDR making 100 calls a day, or if that's somebody who's a salesperson who's in an organization like Yelp, where you could have multiple conversations and demos. I don't even know that Yelp does demos, but you could have
yeah,
multiple sales conversations in a way where there's enough volume of activity that there's something that has moved, the needle should have moved on, that you could coach on, then that's fair. Other variables are the issue that you're dealing with. You know what I mean? You don't take something that is a critical issue to an individual and leave them strung out for 30 days waiting for their next piece of feedback. You know what I mean? These are all of the elements that come into play in a coaching relationship. And you've got to, once you're in a management role, have some level of some level of acumen with respect to being able to define what that cadence should look like, given the role, given the person, given the challenge, and given what you need from the individual.
Yeah. So the answer is it depends.
It depends, man. I should wear a
It
T-shirt that
depends.
says "It depends." Yeah.
It depends. But I would imagine that the difference between something like, training sessions versus coaching sessions, accountability sessions, things like that, that it's probably pretty likely that people might start out like on a 1 week session, something like that, and then if things are going well the way they should be, that oftentimes we probably fall into a bi-weekly cadence. But I think it like you said, it depends, and it's going to
Well,
be fluid.
so let me suggest something maybe contrary to that, because a
Sure.
lot of
Yeah.
folks a lot of folks think of coaching. You said something like maybe as things start going well, you move back to biweekly. As things start going well, get in there and do more coaching. You know what I mean? Think about an
Yeah.
athletic team. You don't just suddenly, when you're doing well, go, okay, guys, we're good. Okay, see you next week.
Yeah.
We're not going to do these 2-a-days anymore. You keep the iron on the fire if that's the type of organization and the type of culture that you're running. I think often folks look at coaching as either a remedial exercise or an exercise when there is a challenge, and that challenge is not a positive challenge, it's a negative challenge. I got to fix something, so I got to get in there
Yeah.
and tweak Sean, you know what I mean? And coaching should just be a construct of that relationship. It's an ongoing thing where you have a lens and a perspective outside of that of the coachee. And like, if you go back to me saying, my very first coach was a swim coach, like 3 years old, right? In a swimming pool. And I've never forgotten since then. I went on to swim competitively, and the swimming coach is outside of the pool. They're not in the pool with you. You know what I mean? They're walking along outside as you are swimming through the lanes on the pool, and they're telling you what your form looks like, where your head should be, what you're doing with your strokes, and how you're getting intimidated, all these other types of things, right? And that's their perspective. That is the same type of figurative perspective that one should have in coaching in a professional environment. And just because things are going well, the coach doesn't sit down. You know what I mean? You're still in
Yeah.
the game. You're still in the game.
Still in the game, and I think that makes a lot of sense. Probably even planning the next sessions, the growth path, everything,
For
right? It
sure.
just, yeah, it's a continue up and to the right to get better,
Absolutely.
continuous improvement.
Absolutely.
So let me ask you this. There's probably two more parts. There's accountability and coaching, and
Yeah.
then the next part would be top performers and underperformers. I shouldn't say, I don't want to say low performers. I want to say people who are probably underperforming, everyone, we're all potential, right?
Because what do we
Uh,
do with low performers? We
what do
help
we
them
do?
find a better job.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I couldn't agree with you more. I think that at some point that's really what it comes down to. Miscast happen, don't they?
That's happened.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And they
Yeah.
know it and we know it, and nobody's happy. And so let's find you a better place, either
Yeah.
in our organization or somewhere else. Yeah.
Yeah. So let's talk about that for a minute, because I think that it's not that there's confusion. There's just a way that people do it. We'll skip to low performers for a second.
Hmm.
And I want to ask you, so in a low performing situation, I'll just ask you point blank, is it, hey, let's put you on a PIP and then see how you do? Or is it better, or I shouldn't say better, or is your model more like, hey, let's actually have this authentic conversation about where we are, talk about where you want to be, and whether or not, and then figure out if they're willing to do it, the work that needs to be done by their inputs and the things that they're requested to do. Because it would seem like at the point where you have a low performer, where you might say, okay, here's what the plan is. Now, can I count on you? What can I expect from you? And then take their input and then watch what they do to kind of gauge whether or not they're really into it. I'll stop there and let you talk about low performers. And I think my question, in order to be succinct, is: do you go straight to PIP, or is PIP just some accessory thing that probably shouldn't exist? I'll take it to the other end of the spectrum.
In a perfect world, you're dealing with somebody who is professional at coaching, and a PIP is probably less necessary when you've been applying real coaching rigor in some kind of a methodology. So if we go back to your first question, which was, do we have a framework? The framework, again, is identify the challenge. That's the C. The O is outline the path to success. The A is develop an action plan. That's the A. The next C is define consequences or considerations, right? And then the H is hold accountable, right? So if we take that first word, which is identifying the challenge. So if you're talking about what you kind of identified was someone who may or may not have had their head in the game, may have not been doing the activity. Well, identifying the challenge necessitates that you define whether it is a mindset challenge, whether
Yeah.
it's an activity challenge, or whether it's a skill set challenge that's impeding their performance. So let's say you've got a low performer who just doesn't believe they should be making cold calls. It's just like, we're in 2023, almost 2024. Who is making cold calls? Like, I've got social that I could reach people on. I can email, I can hop on their Instagram. I could, who knows what, right? I don't want to make cold calls. That's a mentality. That's a belief system issue, right? So that's a
Yeah.
mindset issue. So you deal with that differently. And you begin to confront the mindset in your coaching conversations, and you identify if there's a path by which you can get that person doing some activity that will resolve the mindset where they realize, wow, actually, I made 50 cold calls, spoke to 5 people, hit my quota, and that's a whole lot easier than trying to hit a whole bunch of people on social or LinkedIn and get them to opt in with me, right? Changing behavior that way, right? The second piece there could be activity. They know it's something they should be doing. They're just not doing the doggone thing, right? This is where you tend toward that path of a PIP, right? It's that performance improvement plan where it's just like, you are not doing what you are capable of holding yourself accountable to getting done. I'm not holding you accountable to making sure you've got 10 conversations that convert. I'm holding you accountable to making 80 cold calls a day, and you're not doing the bare minimum activity. So let's talk about what's going on there, right? That's an activity piece. That could lead to a PIP because they're just opting out, right? Then you got the skill
Yeah.
set piece, which is, hey, Sean believes it's the right thing to do. He's doing the activity, but man, I've listened to his calls and like, what is he doing? Well, that's not a coaching opportunity. That becomes a training opportunity.
Yeah.
It's like, hey, you don't have the skills. Let me get you the skills. So the first step is defining that challenge. Based upon the challenge, you can then define what that outcome looks like and whether, in fact, you have a low performer, you have someone who's disengaged and is a non-performer, or whether, in fact, you've got somebody who we're going to just train up. And once you take those paths, then you figure out, what kind of resolution you can provide and what resources you can provide as a manager, and then what you're going to hold that person accountable to doing to help uplift their performance.
Yeah. I think that my next question is going to be about top performers, and it's going to be, and I'm already feeling that the coach framework fits right in there, right? Because we're going to identify what's going on, right?
Yes,
Um,
that's right.
yeah, but thanks for sharing the info, your thoughts, and how the framework folds into low performers. And I like the transition to the PIP because what I think what I heard you say there is that it's usually just self-evident, and again, you might be back up against maybe we have a miscast or we've just lost the will to do it. Someone's gotten too far behind and has realized that maybe not the sales isn't for them, but this might not be the right place or so on. But
And there's a
um,
key there. There's a key there, Sean, too, because I'm thinking also about COVID. I'm thinking about challenges folks have had over the last few months that are real challenges in the marketplace. You know what I mean? You have to take those things into account, and you can only hold people accountable to the things that they can control. So if I
yeah,
can't control who's picking up the phone, if I can only control the quality and the quantity of the activity that I'm doing, you narrow the aperture that way, right? And then that
yeah,
helps you to discern whether, in fact, you have a low performer, or if maybe you've got a low performing activity, or maybe you have a low performing market segment or persona, or any of the other myriad things that we parse sales based upon.
yeah. So for top performers, where I was using the language, things are going well, and so on,
Yeah.
and let's say full cycle reps, or it actually probably it doesn't really matter, does it? People have what they're charged with doing, what the requirements are, quota for meetings, quota for revenue, and so on. Um, what areas do you focus on? And again, I know that I'm going to walk right into this. We're going to go right into the acronym, aren't we, and find out what's going on. But a top performer, somebody who is 100%, 150% of quota, seems to be developing their territory, their accounts, doing everything correctly. Uh, what kind of things do you do for coaching there? Or I think before the show, I was asking you, does it just become, a servant leadership? Do we just stay out of their way? Do we just get them what they need? I think even during the show here, you've said, hey, no, the top performers, there's always something they can do mechanically or something we can work on. So what is the process for helping a top performer continue to grow when it seems like they're doing everything correctly?
I think you'll find this I've read a lot of books of top coaches in sports and folks who have coached the best people in their respective sport. And they get the most attention. And the reason why is because they are so critical to the team and often have the most upside. You
Yeah.
know what I mean? So, and just as an aside, this is just a Hillman thing. I find servant leadership, it's like an oxymoron to me. I don't know what that means.
Yeah.
I truly don't. Like, I kind of feel like you're leading or or you're in servitude. I'm not sure, and I might be being funny about it or a little bit facetious, but I think that leadership is a thing that you do. It doesn't mean that you overlay it on people and that it has to be draconian and that it's like follow me or perish or anything like that. But the servant leadership thing of just how you let the folks who have opted into your leadership and your vision and your guidance just kind of rule the roost just doesn't make sense to me. Like I think that the relationship is symbiotic, and that's not even to say that they are hierarchical. I think sometimes you can have I have actually had folks work for me in a strategic account executive role where the amount of revenue they brought in probably put them at a peer level with me in the organization, but they did not want to manage people. They didn't
Yeah.
want to deal with the powers that be up above. They didn't want to go and have to deal with investors and the board of directors. Equally critical. But we're looking to me for that kind of leadership. And so I afforded that, but still a peer-based relationship that can happen. Anyway, that's my little rant on servant leadership. But point being that you invest a ton of time in these people. And it's just like saying, you can't sell anything to an organization that's doing everything. Well, are you kidding me? Those are your best buyers. You know what I mean? In the same vein, your job, and we're talking about sales here, right? Do some discovery with your top salesperson and figure out what are the personal goals that they have next. Because I'm sure they haven't gotten to a plateau and gone like, all right, yes, I've arrived.
Yeah.
And if they have, then your job is to challenge them and uncover, well, what's Sean's next step? He got pretty darn comfortable. Let's expand that comfort zone and see what else he could be doing, whether it's personally, professionally, or otherwise. And that's when coaching gets fun. Coaching top performers, that's a lot of fun. You know what I mean? That's where you grow as a coach.
Yeah. Do you think, a lot of people will say, it's written in other people's books and so on, that you should be spending more time with your top performers, and if you're not, it says something about you. And I'm with you on a lot of these things that they just don't seem that binary, right? It's like, would you say, hey, yeah, actually, I'm a good coach because I'm spending all my time with my top performers? I'd say, no, you're probably a good coach because your people are performing at a top level. you know?
Let me tell you this. This is let me throw in another consideration.
Mhm.
If you're not coaching and spending time with your top performers, you better be worried that they're going to leave. So if for
Yeah.
no other reason than retention, you need to be spending time with your top performers.
Yeah. I agree 100%. And I'm actually, I probably am in the camp of spending time with top performers, and it's probably just a personal thing. You like it, and maybe if you are a good coach, you create top performers or that sort of thing. But we got a couple of minutes here. I wanted to hear your thoughts on. Let me see if I can frame this correctly.
Sure.
Accountability versus coaching. And what I
Hmm.
what I mean by that is, holding people to account for what they are supposed to be doing, their quotas and things like that, um, in comparison to a coaching session. It sounds like in the coaching framework that those things are conflated, and not in a negative way, but they're all there together, that they work together. Where I've seen some coaches say, no, accountability sessions are short, to the point. Hey, where are we in terms of results, pipeline, and activities? That kind of framework. There's other
Completely
people out.
agree.
Yeah. Uh,
Completely agree with that. These are
so
different
so
conversations.
expand on it. Yeah, please expand on it. Yeah.
Yeah, these are different conversations and different roles of a manager, right? If you think of the roles of a manager, I'd say you've got things like mentorship, right? And mentorship is an opt-in from someone else in the organization that may or may not even report to you, but is saying, hey, Sean, I see where you've gotten in your career. Would love to have some kind of informal or formal conversations around how you did that. And maybe you can model that and help me along with my career as well. That's like a mentorship relationship, right?
Mhm.
You've got accountability. This is, these days, accountability can live in all of these doggone dashboards that we're confronted with, right? Whether it's an automation tool that we're looking at, or whether it's CRM, or whether it's, call recording and call data, whatever, all these types of things. We got so much data coming at us. We got to figure out what are the KPIs that drive our organization. But then accountability should be a pithy conversation that's based upon numbers and not overlaced with a ton of narrative. Right. This is pipeline stuff. This is activity stuff. This is movement of deals. This is conversion metrics, things like that. You should do your homework in advance of that conversation and then be able to have an intelligent conversation with your team person with respect to that, right? Later on. That's accountability,
Yeah.
separate conversation, right? You've got hiring, right? Huge important thing for managers to be able to do effectively. You got training, huge important thing for managers to be able to do effectively, or at least have resources they can bring into the organization. You've got vision and you've got leadership, which are these things around like you are privy to things that your team may not be, and the onus is on you to take those things and be able to articulate them and help the organization, your organization inside of the bigger company, have a North Star and understand why the heck they're showing up to work every day and tie those goals to the goals of the individual so that they feel connected to the team, right? And then you got coaching. And coaching is how you identify the gap between where someone is today and where they need to go to be successful. That's how I define these things differently. So accountability and coaching, two different roles of a manager, equally important, but different conversations.
Yeah. Perfect. I think that's an excellent place to end the session. This was a 30-minute session, and the answer to that question was coaching and accountability are separate sessions. And it sounds like hiring and a couple of other areas are different conversations, different skills to develop, different playbooks to run, and so on. And I liked at the very beginning you said, "Hey, actually, all this really starts with hiring." So
Absolutely.
yeah. Hillman, thank you very much. You want to give us the coach acronym one more time, and then tell everyone they know how to get a hold of you, but we'll do the
You
old-fashioned
know how
stuff
to
right
get a
along.
hold of me, so I won't even go
Yeah,
into that one. But you know what?
yeah,
Go get the book. The book is actually very interesting. It's called Five Secrets of a Sales Coach. It's the one book we've written that's written as a management fable. So it's written in a nonfiction format, which makes the concepts really easy to understand. But coach stands for identifying the challenge, that's the C, outlining the path to success, identifying an action plan, that's the A, articulating the consequences or the consideration, that's the next C, and then the H stands for holding folks accountable.
awesome. Thank you so much, Hillman. I'm so thankful that you came to join us, and you and I got a chance to talk for a half hour on this topic. I cannot thank you enough.
You're the man, Sean. It's always good to see you. Thanks for having me.
You're welcome. Thank you.